Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the Walbrook Club, and in particular to our distinguished guest speaker, Alok Sama. All you need to know is Wharton, Morgan Stanley, SoftBank to best-selling author. This progression suggests that rather like Leonardo da Vinci, Alok is something of a Renaissance man, an aesthete as well as the sharpest tool in the shed. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's crack on. Alok, you wrote in your very insightful book that investment bankers, like sharks, need continuous motion to stay alive. Were you born a shark or did you become one?
Purely accidental investment banker. You want me to talk you through that?
Yes.
So I grew up in India in the 70s, 80s, and at the time, India was socialist, I think it's fair to say. I mean, it's just absolutely nothing going on. I was studying mathematics. I think I go through this a little bit in the book. This book is not really an origin story. That gets kind of boring. But I was studying mathematics, and I had all kinds of, kind of bizarre intentions of being an academic and, kind of cracking Fermat's last theorem. And my father, who was a scientist himself, connected me to someone who he thought was a mathematician, and this gentleman sort of was, but turned out he taught statistics at the Wharton School. And he met with me and he said, look, what are you going to do studying mathematics? I mean, you're not going to make a living, and, why don't you think about finance? And I had, again, this is India, 1983. I mean, I kind of knew a little bit about America, but forget about Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan. I hadn't even heard those names. I mean, it was Citigroup and Bank of America, I think, were the only two global financial institutions that had any kind of presence in India. So I knew nothing about finance. But I went to Wharton. He helped me get some financial aid, which is very tough those days. And then I sort of stumbled on this job at at Morgan Stanley, and kind of that was my pathway into finance. And it was a fortunate accident. I mean, it was just a great time to be in the business. You just had to be there to make money. And I was, and did that for 17 years. And
so you weren't born a shark?
No, I wasn't born a shark. No.
Why did you?
I had to become one, though.
Well, quite right. But why did you leave Morgan Stanley?
I left. So I had a great ride, particularly through. So I was in the tech space. I was a technology banker, technology, media, telecom. So my last job was running the telecom media practice in Europe, so based in London. And so great ride through the bubble. And then we had a team of 73 people in Canary Wharf. And after the bubble burst, I was told to decimate that team down to 19. I mean, it was vicious. It was really nasty, and they told me I could have a job covering financial institutions, but I was 40 at the time, and I generally felt burnt out. So I decided to leave, and they were kind enough to kind of make me a senior advisor for a bit. But that was my path out of investment banking.
What were you brought into SoftBank to do exactly?
To do deals. I mean, I was brought in by a close friend of mine, Nikesh Arora, he was actually head of Google in Europe, and I met him in my Morgan Stanley days. And he wanted to, when I met him, he was at T-Mobile, German phone company, and was looking to get out, and he had some ideas on what he wanted to do. And I connected him with a few private equity and venture players, and that didn't work out. He ended up at Google, went on to be Chief Business Officer of Google, and when he landed at SoftBank as the heir designate to Masayoshi Son, he asked me to come on board. And they had SoftBank, that is, had no in-house deal machinery. It was basically a phone company, and the idea was to build up that capability, which is what I was brought on to do.
A bit of an expansive question, but how do you describe Masa?
Crazy, in a word. We can get expansive, but I think if I had to, that one word, I think kind of crazy in a nice way. The way he describes himself is crazy in a positive way, I should say. I think the way he describes himself is accurate. I mean, he says he wants to be remembered as the crazy guy who lives in the future. And that literally is what he was, in my experience. I mean, he's had this incredible track record. Once could be a fluke, but he's done it time and time again. From the SoftBank, basically, the name of the company is a bank for software. So the company started betting on the PC revolution. It was a distributor of Microsoft software in Japan. So he called that right, and the company was successful. And then he bet big on the internet for a while, for a week actually, was the richest man in the world, owned 8% of, if you can believe, all internet stocks in the US public markets. And then didn't quite lose it all, but got into the Guinness Book of World Records for having lost the most money ever. Still left him a billionaire, but he lost 67 billion personally.
Which was 95% of his fortune.
It was 95% of his fortune. Yeah, exactly. And then his comeback story was he called the smartphone revolution, and he bought this phone company in Japan. And that's a story I tell in the book. He bought it from Vodafone, and Vodafone was so desperate to get rid of this company. It was a total dog. I mean, it was bleeding. I think the number was $6 billion a year, and they were so desperate to get rid of it, they actually lent him $6 billion to buy the company, which is bizarre. And that's actually classic Masa financial engineering. So he had financing from Vodafone, and then he did a full business securitization. One of the first times that's been done on that scale, arranged by Deutsche Bank, borrowed 11 billion. So he borrowed 17 billion to buy a company for 19 billion, and that turned out to be a phenomenal success story, all based on a handshake from Steve Jobs. That when Apple came out with an iPhone, Steve Jobs, that is, would give Masa an exclusive for Japan. So he got that one right, and now his big bet is AI. And I'm sure most of you have heard about Project Stargate, which I'm happy to talk about, though that happened after I left. And
we'll certainly come on to AI, yeah. But what were Masa's blind spots?
Hubris, which he admits to be quite honest. I think he made some poor judgments on people too, but Adam Newman's probably the most prominent example. But he was, to his credit, he kind of gets it. I think I quote this in the book. His exact words, public statement was, "I am ashamed of myself for being carried away by the successes of the past," right? Which is hubris, and he made some terrible mistakes through that whole 2021 particularly. He got carried away.
Yes. And which deals did you work on exactly?
That's a very long list, but among my favorites were probably the one closest to my heart, and coincidentally the most successful for SoftBank was Arm Holdings, British company, and the T-Mobile merger, Sprint T-Mobile merger, which is a very big deal, $60 billion deal. I guess those would be the two most, not necessarily, well, the T-Mobile merger was the most complicated by far. I mean, that was a 3-year process, and we looked at merging with Charter and a whole bunch of permutations and combinations before executing on that. The Arm deal was very quick and phenomenally successful.
From the list of deals you worked on, which was the most audacious?
Oh, that has to be Arm. I mean, we did. It was a classic, what in M&A lingo is called a bear hug. I mean, and the timing actually was pretty cool too. I mean, we made our move right after. There's a chapter in the book, as you know, about that deal. We moved right after Brexit, and were able to convince the government that they should see this as a sign of confidence in Britain, and because I don't think that deal could be done today. By the way, if Arm had been a UK listed company today, but we were able to convince them. They extracted commitments out of us, doubling headcount, which SoftBank exceeded. But it was audacious in as much as we came along and offered a 43% premium to what was already a very expensive stock. No diligence, no contingencies in terms of approval by regulators anywhere, which is just unbelievably audacious. I mean, the bankers on the other side, which is Goldman and Lazard, it's as is typical. You kind of sit down after a deal and you talk about kind of what happened, and they were all, so they told me, just absolutely flabbergasted at the audacity. I think that was pretty much the word they used.
To change direction, are markets still departing from fundamentals when valuing companies?
Which markets? I mean, you got to get granular with that. I think that question is usually asked in the context of technology and U.S. technology stocks. I think that take NVIDIA, for example, which is the ultimate high flyer. I mean, I've lived through bubbles. The closest comparable to NVIDIA in terms of its place in the technology ecosystem is probably Cisco in 1999-2000, in as much as Cisco was, still is, kind of the picks and shovels, kind of the infrastructure, the plumbing for the internet, in much the same way that NVIDIA provides the plumbing for AI. Right? And it is, and the beauty of that business model is it's agnostic. For Cisco, it didn't matter whether Google or Yahoo won. Either way, kind of as long as people were getting online and using the internet, Cisco would win. Similarly, it doesn't matter whether it's Claude or ChatGPT or DeepSeek or whatever. Everyone's using NVIDIA chips, so it's a similar market position, but Cisco, at the height of that internet bubble, traded at 200 times earnings, and NVIDIA hasn't gone further than 35, 36 times earnings. So it's not outrageous. Now, there could be a slowdown, there could be a correction. I think there already has been a correction, clearly. But I don't think it's overblown. I mean, you look at big tech in general, the valuations are not outrageous. So I don't think we're in bubble territory. I think we're in correction territory, which is kind of healthy right now.
Does AI concern you?
No, it does not. I think I see it as an opportunity. I think people make a little bit too much of AI. I think the notion of AI being some type of arms race is a little bit silly, candidly. I mean, because it is, in some respects, no more than it could be more, but at its core, it's a productivity tool. It's a productivity tool for businesses, and it's a productivity tool, it will be a productivity tool increasingly for individuals. And I sort of amused when Project Stargate, which is this $500 billion thing that Trump announced with a lot of fanfare, people called it or compared it to the Manhattan Project, which, if you think about it in this context, is a little bit silly, because it's sort of ironic too, because it's a Manhattan Project, but the lead investor happens to be Japanese. And sort of insensitive when I saw that. It's like, do you understand what you're talking about? I mean, and the lead investor is SoftBank, obviously. A technology partner, not the exclusive technology partner, is Arm, which is a British company. And one of the lead financial investors is MGX from Abu Dhabi, right? So, in what sense is this like a, kind of Trump? I mean, he claims credit for it in a very Trumpian kind of way, but it's not as if Masa Son or Sam Altman said, okay, Trump's president, let's do this big thing. I mean, this thing had been in the works. So coming back to your question, I think AI is a productivity tool, and I think it is, every business should be, you're going to be toast otherwise, has got to be thinking in terms of incorporating that into everything they do. I mean, I think customer service, customer acquisition, coding is, at the enterprise level, it's all happening. I think Jensen Wang had a wonderful way of describing it, which is your IT department in the future will be your HR department, in as much as if you need a problem solved or a task done, you don't necessarily think of hiring another person. You go to your IT department, which can very quickly build you an AI agent to get the job done. I think that is happening. That will start to happen at a personal level too. I haven't seen it. It's kind of. I mean, I think tools like Perplexity, etc., are great. I've already moved beyond Google totally, but I think you'll see that evolve into agentification. The idea that you don't just. I mean, kind of the most trivial example is you don't just search for a restaurant. You just say, okay, go out and make me a booking, and an AI agent will make a phone call and will tell whoever's at the other end, hey, Philip, can you book me something for dinner tonight? And we'll come back and report to you and say, here are your options, and if need be, give a credit card, etc. That stuff is very real. It's a little bit clunky now, but it'll be. We'll all be doing that.
You'll be having dinner at the Walbrook every night.
There you go. We should all be so lucky.
Alok, you're not out of the woods. 2 more questions, if I may.
Yeah, far away.
Chapter 1, you're an investment banker.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, a deal maker. Chapter 3, an author. Do you have a sense of chapter 4?
Oh man, no, I don't. I mean, it is. I genuinely feel that I'm living my best life. So, chapter 4 is, I don't know. I mean, if you believe in the afterlife, but no, this is it, and it's cool.
Maybe the House of Commons.
No.
And then I thought I'd leave the hardest question last. I know you're a big cricket fan.
Yeah.
So who is the better player, Gavaskar or Tendulkar?
Okay. Great question. I would plug for Gavaskar any day.
Really?
Mainly, well, look. I mean, I think I'm a purist. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Test cricket. And Gavaskar literally was one man, literally. I mean, he stood alone and he faced off against, without a helmet, kind of the greatest bowlers ever, kind of the West Indian, kind of the Andy Roberts and the Malcolm Marshalls of the world, and Lilly and Thompson and Richard Hadley and Imran Khan. I mean, so Gavaskar was one of a kind. Tendulkar had surrounded by talent, Rahul Dravid, later Sehwag, Ganguly. I mean, that was like one of the all-time batting lineups. So he had it relatively easy, I think. He had more raw talent, but I just admire Gavaskar for what he stood for. Sort of one man against all odds, kind of facing off against the finest.
I think we can both agree they both come second and third to Ian Botham.
Maybe. Actually, if you had to debate, kind of that whole era of all-rounders, my favorite was Imran Khan.
Yes.
For a whole bunch of reasons.
He was very debonair.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Alok Sama, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we disappear, we have copies of the book. I cannot recommend it more highly. I meant this as a compliment, but I don't think it landed very well. I devoured it in 2 days. So I'd really strongly recommend it. But above all, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.